You're making me feel like I have low testosterone because
Get a blood test.
I've gone through periods where I just I cared a lot and then I stopped caring so much about goals or all of that stuff.
It's possible.
But I can build muscle fine. So wouldn't that mean that my T is fine?
Not necessarily, because
yeah, you said something in a video that I watched of yours that really I was interested in. You mentioned people who take TRT are more motivated. I wanted to ask if that is kind of like the motivation you get from amphetamine. Is there a similarity between the steroid motivation and amphetamine motivation?
No, in that amphetamine's a very acute response. I find that you have an instant drive to do something, whereas with testosterone, it's more like a background. I don't know. It's again, I imagine this is the same thing as you trying to describe psychedelics to me. It's more like, okay, this is a good example. So think about your mindset when you were not dieting versus your mindset when you are dieting. How much easier is it to get work done when you're fed properly versus when you're dieted down, you have no motivation, you're tired as fuck and you feel shitty? That's not an exact comparison, because if you have natural normal test levels, you're okay. And then you push it up to super physiologic. It's not like you're going to get that much more motivation or drive necessarily. But if you're a guy who's you're comparing low T to high T in a natural range, drastic difference in terms of what you're going to be able to do. So stress resilience, motivation to do things, how driven you are, goal oriented. And I do think there is a direct interplay with gender and how many become successful. And I know that might be a touchy subject, but I mean, I don't think it's a coincidence that there's obviously successful female entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
But in general, the more male energy, masculine, guys with test typically excel above females in similar fields. Now, there are females who do excel. Again, that's not, I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but in general, I think testosterone really dictates how you go about your life and how you go to achieve things. So I don't know, that's kind of the best way I can put it is it definitely does make a difference in terms of your ability to fight through things, your motivation to drive through adversity, your goal setting, caring about goals to begin with. That kind of shit is definitely enhanced.
You're making me feel like I have low testosterone because
Get a blood test.
I've gone through periods where I just I cared a lot and then I stopped caring so much about goals or all of that stuff.
It's possible.
But I can build muscle fine. So wouldn't that mean that my T is fine?
Not necessarily, because again, when it comes down to androgen receptor content, you could have a guy with topped out test levels, like the reference range. Do you know what a reference range is? It's on your blood work, you would have this is the normal amount for the population.
Yeah, I know Canada's is really low, right?
Yeah, it's 250 to 850 or 900, which is years ago it would have been the upwards of 1100 would be the top end of the reference range.
Right.
So anyways, they will, hypothetically you would think, okay, well, if you have a guy with a testosterone level of 700 versus a guy with 300, he probably has more ability to pack on muscle.
Right.
And from an actual signaling aspect, that's not totally illogical to think, but when you actually at a receptor level, your receptivity to the actual androgen attaching to the androgen receptor,
how sensitive you are to it.
Yeah. So your actual expression at a gene level is different dependent on your actual androgen receptor content. It doesn't just come down to the volume of drug. Gotcha. So even if I injected me with 200 milligrams, you with 200 milligrams, we're not going to respond the same way at all. Massive variation to the point where some guys look like bodybuilders and some guys, not necessarily on 200 milligrams. I'm just saying if you inject yourself with testosterone, some guys get disproportionately strong effects and some guys are barely respond. And then most guys are somewhat in the middle. So
same with all drugs, eh? Testosterone, psychedelics, all an individualized, unique experience.
Yeah. So I don't know, man, but it's definitely a lot of entrepreneurs I know do TRT, not even just for performance.
That's the angle I would be interested in, is from an entrepreneurial
I know
perspective.
a lot of guys who do it simply to maximize all the things I mentioned about stress resilience, stuff like that, and it definitely makes a difference, dude. And especially if you want to be lean year round, or at least striking distance of being what your goal body composition is, that, to be completely honest, is typically unsustainable for most people without some sort of exogenous hormone support. So I would never recommend a guy who's not naturally gifted to sort of hover around that normally to try and like pursue a calorie deprived diet model to hold that body composition year round, consequently inhibiting their testosterone, their thyroid hormone, a bunch of different things, which downstream is also going to play with your neurological health and how you respond to psychedelics and how you respond to different things, because it all interplays. Like estrogen has a huge role on neurology and whatnot. So that kind of stuff is like a huge detriment for naturals, unfortunately, if you want to be like the shredded guy.
Oh, I can't do it.
It's fucking impossible if you're not like hormonally enhanced, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But with TRT, it's not like you have to be bodybuilder hormone levels. It's just like replacing what you've deprived yourself of, essentially. I don't necessarily recommend it. I'm just saying that hypothetically, that's a scenario. If somebody wanted to sustain that like unreasonable body composition, or at least close to it with no detriment to their performance, and in a mental context in terms of being sharp and on the ball and whatnot, especially as you get like deeper into your 30s and pushing into your 40s, depending on how much you're like sleep deprived too, and like a bunch of lifestyle factors that play with your testosterone production, like, yeah, it could be like a night and day difference potentially.
So I'd be curious to try it, but I don't know if I want to make that jump.
Yeah, don't proactively jump on anything. Just get like a blood test and you can see for yourself like sort of where you fall.
Yeah, see, my fear is, personally speaking, I don't like the idea of having, same with like taking the amphetamines. I hated how it made it. Yeah, I got to take it all the time. And I'm thinking like if I tried it, then I'm dependent on it, because then my test levels are going to crash when I go off it.
Yeah, so what you could do, actually, hypothetically, it's not like once you take it, you're shut down forever. If you took a short acting version of it, you could get it in and out of your system quick to a point where you would be back up to homeostasis like relatively quickly. It's not like you crash and then you're
What does that mean, a short acting version?
So like there's different esters attached to the drug itself. So your body cleaves these esters off.
We're just talking about TRT, right?
Yeah. So testosterone is the actual androgen itself that's exerting its effects. But when you administer testosterone just in its base form, it has such a short active life. It's like in and out of your system in like hours.
Oh, wow.
So they have to attach something called an ester to it. So there's different esters like propionate. It's a very short one. Then there's like a bit longer ones. There's enanthate is a moderate one. Cypionate is a longer one. Decanoate is a very long one. Undecanoate is a pretty long one. Undeslinate is a very long one. These ones get cleaved off, and as they're cleaved off, like basically you'll look at the chemical, it'll be like the androgen, like the testosterone molecule, and then this big like chain off of it of the ester, and it's longer and longer the more your body has to cleave off, essentially.
Gotcha.
And that extends the active life of it. So for somebody who's actually on TRT and has dialed in their dose, they want to inject less frequently typically. So they will use a long-acting testosterone like a testosterone cypionate, inject it once or twice a week, and then it's in their system for, they only have to do it like one shot a week or something.
That's not so bad.
Yeah. So, but with these shorter ones, you're also exposing yourself to the risk of, if you use a long one and you don't know how you respond, say you have an adverse reaction or you want to get off, you now have to wait much longer for it to clear out of your system, and extending your duration of being hormonally deprived, essentially, which is not optimal for somebody who's experimental about it. So at that point, it would be like the equivalent of me, of you being like, am I going to recommend you a psychedelic that lasts for 24 hours versus one? Like, what is the safer introductory thing to like control the outcome, So if I have a bad reaction, you don't want to be fucked for a whole day, obviously. So same thing with tests. You would ideally introduce something, if you're going to experiment, that is shorter so you can clear it quicker if you wanted to get it out of your system.
But if you wanted to stay on it, then you would just make the jump to a longer one?
Yeah, exactly.
Gotcha. I didn't know you could do that. That's fascinating.
Yeah, so there's like a lot of, that's how they tweak the pharmacokinetic profile of these drugs, is they'll use different ester chains in order to extend.
And that's the safest way, right? Beyond doing like SARMs? Is that
SARMs is like
a bad idea?
Yeah, I wouldn't do SARMs because those shut your testosterone down and would actually, despite the fact that you'd gain muscle on them because they are very potent at what they do, they also are relatively potent. They shut down your testosterone production, so you'd actually have symptoms of hypogonadism simultaneously whilst gaining muscle. So it's like the most paradoxical thing ever. You feel like shit, but you're making gains. Yeah.
So the best is just classic testosterone.
For
the safest.
Like where you're at in terms of just the fact that I've heard you even having like symptoms of low T, and the fact that you're looking for aspects of it that are not just muscle growth. You're looking for the mental component too.
Yeah.
This is driven through testosterone mainly.
Gotcha.
So that's what I would be not recommending looking into. And obviously, to be honest, like it's really easy to get baseline blood work and just see where you're at. Like there's no risk or harm in that.
I'm curious. I'm just curious what my levels are. I should do the blood work. Do you know where to go? Where do you go to get this blood work?
It's a bit of this conversation would be like a tangent for like people wouldn't give a fuck because how many Canadians are going to watch this and know what I'm talking about.
We got way more stuff to talk about still.
Yeah, so we'll talk about that after, and I'll
all right.
set it up. But
last question on the testosterone. I don't know if this is relevant, but people who take it, they get the back pimples, right? I have back pimples all the time.
Okay. Yeah.
So could that be a sign that I have high testosterone, or is it irrelevant?
It depends, because there are individuals who just don't get acne when they take a shit ton of hormones, like beyond super physiological grams of shit.
Right.
And there are some individuals.
But I always have it. Like I have it right now. I have back pimples.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily it definitely for you in particular, I bet would be a metric of how much test you have in your system to an extent because you're prone to it, but it doesn't mean relative to another individual. Mm-hmm. They could have a shit ton of tests, have no acne whatsoever.
I see what you're saying.
But for you, presumably, if you had lower T, I imagine your acne would be lesser intense, and the more your test is higher, I imagine it would be worse.
So I'll likely get lots of back pimples if I took it.
I imagine it would be exacerbated to some extent. However, it doesn't mean you can't attenuate that with other pharmacology, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So
I see.
Yeah.
All right, let's jump on something else.
So pickup artist stuff. Totally different.